If just to go based off of this question, because I like that you've laid out some questions here to sort of guide our where our thoughts should go. When you read the first question, do you remember the day you left your country? I thought to myself, I don't necessarily remember that at all, but I remember the first day that that I realized I came from somewhere else, that there was maybe a little bit more to my story of belonging to one place. And that came through interacting with mostly my grandparents and older relatives who had immigrated, and them sort of telling their stories of remembering a place and sort of trying to convey what that meant to me, and how I should remember it and know it and understand it. So um, yeah, I'm trying to really like go through my memory bank here and see if there was a one specific day where I sort of realized that. But I think it was just kind of in knowing my grandparents and really feeling close to them, um, because oftentimes I find with a lot of immigrant experiences, especially of first generation kids who are born in the States, they're often reared by their grandparents or by family members who have come, who've immigrated themselves. And that's kind of how we start to know, or how we start to like understand that there's more to just this one place. There's one more to this one identity of us belonging to the U.S. or whatever states we come from.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Do you have experiences with grandparents or people who basically taught you, since we can't remember the day we left our
Yeah.
country, who taught you that there was even another component to your identity?
I think on my dad's side, who's Latina, is that him just telling us about his grandparents and that they came here to work on the railroads that run through Colorado, and
Yeah.
that story of like how they got here was when like is something that I remember. I don't remember like specifically when he ever told us that, but it was just something that I always knew, I guess, growing up.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I remember. And it's weird when you're a kid too, you don't really know what to necessarily make of those stories.
Yeah.
It's hard because you grow up going to a school here, where mostly, at least my school, was fairly um, homogenous in terms of like how, like, the types of people or the demographic
Yeah.
of people that went to the school. And um, it's almost like school is just this is like um, maybe a sanctuary or a place where you could express that you had like a different, that there was like a different side of you, that there was like a
Yeah.
different thing. And but mostly the way I understood my experience of duality and being and sort of having a migrant past and sort of having a migrant family was at home, was just like growing up and being with my grandparents.
Yeah.
um, and yeah, I guess we can also talk about it, maybe something we brought up earlier too, was like passing, and how like not necessarily being very overtly different, I suppose,
Yeah.
in our makeup, kind of how that sort of impacted that too, that
Yeah.
experience of kind of being in between, or being sort of caught in the crossfire of a lot of different things. Like, do people ever look at you and like face value? They're like, oh, okay, you must have some sort of Latinx background.
No,
Yeah.
never.
Yeah.
So I think like the earliest memory I have someone of like someone who was Latina telling me I was not Latina just because of how I looked was in elementary school, because I wanted to play with these kids because I had just moved here. And so I was trying to play with these kids who were Latina, looked Latina, and so they looked like my family. And so
Yeah.
when I went to go play with them, they're like, "You can't play with us. You're not Latina." And then I'd be like,
Yeah.
"No, I am." And they're like, "Well, you don't look it. So
Yeah.
go and play with the people you look more like,"
Yeah.
essentially.
Right.
So that was like always rough not being able to belong to either one, because like I'm not Latina enough to hang out with Latinas, but I'm also
Uh-huh.
like not white enough that all my white friends comprehend everything.
Yeah, I felt that too in a lot of ways. I felt that too. And yeah, it just it offers up in one way you feel sort of trapped and like caught and like betwixt maybe like a little in between, but in a lot of ways I think it offered sort of almost a more almost like a dynamic like third space almost if you will, like if
Yeah.
you can't be you're caught like you can't be on one side of the binary or the other, but now through being in the middle, you can sort of open up and offer like a new ways for your identity to develop. And
Mhm.
so I've experienced that a lot too with feeling a hybrid identity or like feeling, not necessarily tied to one or the other and not feeling guilty for that, but
Yeah.
feeling like this sort of freedom, I suppose you could say, in sort of creating a new identity or picking parts of different aspects of both
Mhm.
and saying, okay, well, this is how I'm gonna make this composite kind of form. So
Yeah.
yeah. Um, how is our stories unique? I guess are they very unique? I mean, we've already talked about some of the
Yeah.
ways that they are. Um, yeah. Did you feel like I guess mine is unique in the sense I guess it would make sense to sort of maybe spell it out first. So my grandmother came to the United States in 1953. She was a physician at a tuberculosis clinic that opened in Fall River, Massachusetts. And they were, I guess, TB was really there was a really bad outbreak at the time. So they were pulling doctors from all over the country, I mean, all over the world. Um, and I don't necessarily know the details on how she made the cut. I'm sure she would be really upset if I didn't remember because always took a lot of pride in her work and her craft. Um, and so she came first, which is almost I've been told in a lot of experiences, it's not usually or it often is a woman that migrates first, but
Yeah.
that they do sort of they leave their families and then they have to, they send money back or they work to have a life to sustain their families that are obligated to stay in the home countries. But yeah, my grandmother came first, and then my grandfather, who she was married to at the time, followed suit, and they had my mother here. So my mother was born here, which I think makes me only one and a half first generation or half. There's some half involved because my mom was born here, and she very much grew up in this very typical kind of like American suburban kid experience. Like she went to public school, and the only thing that really made her look really different was her name sounded funny, and like no one could pronounce her name, and that was always really hard. She got made fun of endlessly for her name, but I mean, if you look at photos of her, she looks like she blends right into the rest of her class. I mean, she doesn't nothing is all that different, but I guess where she grew up was fairly conservative, and a lot and people don't if people don't know anything about Turkey, but if the one thing that they do know is that it's a Muslim country.
Mhm.
And so that was also kind of something that she had to experience, in terms of some discrimination and things of that nature. But um, and then my father came too in 1982 or 81. So he fully was born in Turkey and did all of his schooling there, and he came here in 81 and became naturalized. Married my mom. I think that was part of it, because so she was born here. And they met each other in Maryland and got married. And so yeah, I think that the the condition of my mom being born here and my dad immigrating and always being a little bit more visibly Turkish than anyone else in my family. And he's from the eastern part of Turkey, which yields sort of much more sort of, I guess you could say, features that sort of are indicative of that part of the world, whereas my mom sort of has more of a uh, Eastern European background and sort of has a lot of her ancestors come from northern Greece.
Mm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think just already in my experience with migration and immigration is that there is this always this like dichotomy. There's always these like things at play, these dualisms. My mom was born here, my dad was born there. My mom looks like me, my dad doesn't look like me. There's sort of these tensions kind of, and I think that sort of makes it kind of unique sometimes is like the dualisms. Okay, that was very long-winded. I don't know if that was any of any use, but yeah, I
Yeah.
would love to hear how maybe yours is unique or the uniqueness or the quirks that you find in your own.
Well, I think with my family, so my family's half Latina, and then my mom's family is, her family comes from Germany and Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have a lot of like cultural differences just in between like the Irish and German side. But then when you
Mm-hmm.
cross those two things over with my dad's Latina
Yeah.
side, it's very interesting, and it's always very interesting to hear like my parents talk about their relationship in the beginning, because my grandparents and their family weren't too welcoming of Latinos when they first started
Yeah.
dating. So it's always interesting to hear my parents talk about like how some people in my mom's family were still racist towards
Yeah.
even my
Did you
father.
do you remember experiencing that any like firsthand? Like, do you remember
Uh,
like your grandparents like saying anything
yeah,
or
they
feeling like,
still definitely say some things. They're always like, oh, those Mexicans coming in to steal our jobs. And I'm like,
yeah,
me?
wow,
Dad? Grandma? Great
wow,
grandma? Like, who are you talking
yeah,
about? Like, it's not everyone doing that, and people do come in through legal means. And if they are coming through illegal means,
yeah,
maybe we need to relook at our system, and having those
yeah,
conversations
absolutely,
with my grandparents, as well as like, since I do pass as white, I have the privilege of not having so much fear around other white people when they bring
mm-hmm.
this up, and being able to talk to them about it without
Right,
fearing so much backlash
for
from
sure,
them.
yeah, like you can be maybe a little bit, you can confront it more, like
Yeah.
it's not, yeah, it's not as, it's not something that you have to like hide from or like just let pass into the night kind of, you can like
Yeah.
actually confront it. That's really interesting. Do you still have, are you still like close with the German and like Irish side of the
Yeah.
family? Yeah.
For sure, the German side, we get together every 2 years and have like a giant pig roast at my family's hometown in a very small town in Nebraska. So it's always cool to come there, and there's been a lot more Latinos that have married into the family, and so now it is a more diverse mix when we do go, and there are people who look
Yeah.
like me and my cousins, who are my first and third cousins, because my mom's cousin married my dad's sister, and so we're very related, but we all look fairly white passing or
Mm-hmm.
not quite Latina, and so now there are more kids. When it used to just be like us, there are a lot more kids now that look like me and my cousins, which is like great to see, and great to have
Yeah.
more family members to be like talk to you about the intersection that we hold as being white but also Latino.
Right, right. You can sort of like share now in those
Yeah.
experiences and see how they are different for, you know, for the younger generations or see how things are sort of maybe either getting more, getting worse or getting better,
Yeah.
kind of. That's super, that's good too. Yeah. And it crossed my mind that when you said that the German and Irish side of the family, I mean, you know, that is an immigration story too.
Yeah.
And so I often feel the same frustration that I do with a lot of people who have sort of these European backgrounds, who sort of claim to be like super American
But they're
now,
not Native
and it's
American,
and you're,
so
yeah, and you're not Native or Indigenous, and you also immigrated to this country too at some
yeah.
point, like, so yeah, I don't, yeah, that's also interesting. I
Yeah, I like to point out to my grandpa too, because when the Irish were first coming in, people were saying the same thing about them as they were Mexicans. And so I
Right.
was like, how do you think your grandma felt about people saying this? Because she
uh,
came over here during like the potato famine, when a lot of people were fleeing to America, and
Sure. And a lot of the Irish were considered second class citizens. Like they were
exactly.
really, yeah. And it's funny how that's forgotten and not
Yeah.
used in an empathic understanding of migration
Yeah.
and moving bodies. And yeah, super interesting. Um, I guess we sort of talked about cultural differences already, but I'd love to talk about them more and the ones that are very specific to you too. Um, yeah, do you feel more because of your position of sort of in between? Do you feel like more connected to one culture over the other, or has it changed in times? Like at times you felt more connected to
Yeah.
a Latina identity versus like maybe something else from that.
Yeah, I've always felt more connected to my Latina identity, which my mom kind of gets mad about just because she's like, "You're half me too," and I'm like, "I understand that, but we grew
Yeah,
up closer to my dad's family,
yeah,
so that was a lot of the information I was getting was from them and not necessarily my mom's side of the family, which could have easily changed that." And my first year of college, I spent living 5 minutes away from my grandparents who are white, and so during that time, it was very interesting and very cool to see like their culture and what they've built around them and stuff, and being able to be a part of that, because instead of like focusing on some holidays, like my grandpa goes all out for St. Patrick's Day and like does all these like other traditions that I haven't been a part of, like eating uh corned beef and
oh god,
like
yeah, that's like so
stew
like
on St. Patrick's Day, and having Irish coffees with him and like doing the stuff that he's like, this is like what my childhood was.
right.
So it was interesting during that year to like experience that with him. But yeah, still think during that time it was me identifying as Latina just because that's who I grew up around primarily.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that it's a little bit it's similar to me too, even though people ask me all the time, like, oh, which parent is the Turkish one? Like, you must be half. But it's actually full Turkish, but that's already such a complicated notion because Turkey is such a like
Diverse place,
diverse,
yeah.
yeah, and it's not really you can't like there's no like ethnic like meaning behind being Turkish. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hardly can be, in my opinion, even a nationality because there's just so much going on there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, people ask me all the time. They're like, "Oh, which one is like the American parent?" Which they mean by American, they mean which one is the white parent. And I'm like, "Well, I don't. They both are." But um, in terms of cultural differences, I think that I felt that really pronounced with my parents really trying to make the experience of a Muslim family, especially a Muslim family after 9/11,
Mm-hmm.
very comfortable for me and my siblings, which um, we already benefit from the privilege of not being visibly Muslim because no one in my family veils, and we're hardly considered necessarily like very devout or practicing,
Mm-hmm.
except for it's extremely culturally ingrained. The religion is at least, but through my parents like trying to help us assimilate into sort of this like quintessential American experience, they let us like get a tree one year for Christmas, and they let us like put up decorations, and we were so excited because now we could relate to all of our friends, and we know, we could like imagine Santa Claus, even though we always knew Santa Claus never existed because we never, our parent, we
Yeah.
weren't there very much like in that. But so, um, any sort of cultural differences I felt were really my parents sort of trying to erase them a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
and me feeling like they should still maybe be retained or still somewhat like known, and then like me reconciling with that. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I think that the more and more I go through it, I realize that a lot of these like in things that we think of as inherently different, I actually find a lot of similarities with, and that's part of the reason why I think that this position of in betweenness is really helpful, because when you're in between, you don't necessarily feel 100% devoted to either side. So you're able to sort of connect with people because you're almost freed
Yeah.
to be able to find the similarities a little bit easier. So I find that I shared a lot of the same experiences with other students in my grade who had immigrant backgrounds. Like I felt that's where my friends came from, and we came from, all different parts of the world, and I had all different ties and like feelings of closeness to where we came from, but still we were able to connect over these sort of similarities in being different. I don't know. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, yeah. Did you feel that any with like your friendships and stuff, and how you connected with other people who might have had some like similar background and experiences as you?
Yeah, I think it was definitely like easier, and it does like create me having difficult conversations with some friends too when they
Yeah.
say something that's not completely true about one of the other races that they don't hold, or identities they
Mm-hmm.
don't hold. And so that's something that's interesting. And I like kind of going off topic here, but you're talking about your parents after 9/11 trying to
Mm-hmm.
create an environment where
Yeah.
like you and your siblings felt safe. I think that's interesting because my great grandparents kind of did the same thing for my grandma, because like my family doesn't speak Spanish anymore because my great grandparents were harassed by the KKK in
Oh
Colorado.
my
And so
gosh.
because of that, they're like, okay, we're going to distance ourselves
Yeah, and totally
from
erase a lot
this
of, yeah,
and erase some of these things. Like we don't celebrate quinceañeras, we don't do like
yeah.
a lot of these things that like a lot of Latina girls get to
Right.
experience.
Right.
So it's like interesting that your family had to go through something similar to
Yeah.
having to like wanting to erase something so they could fit in more, even
Right.
though that's like something I wish I had more connection to, and it
Interesting.
sounds like you do
Yeah,
too.
definitely. Right. At first, I was sort of, I didn't resent my parents, but I felt, I mean, I felt like a little bit like they contributed to some sort of loss of identity where
Mm-hmm.
it's like I could have felt really tethered to something and really strong in something. But especially what it sounds like in your case is like a lot of these erasures are a mode of survival. I mean, you
Yeah.
have to sort of, it feels like it's something that you have to do to be safe and survive and feel it's not necessary. Maybe it goes a little bit beyond just fitting in. It's just to survive. It's to stay safe. It's to,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's to be able to just to get by kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's crazy. And that was in, where in Colorado are you from?
My family's from Longmont.
Oh, Longmont. So like right around here.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
right friends down the street.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, what was that experience for you? I mean, I don't know too much about Colorado, but I've been told so many times that Boulder and its surrounds have not always been this very
Yeah.
upper middle class, white, like kind of bubble. And what have your experiences of that been, especially with um, like navigating it with your specific particular identity of having a Latina background? And do you think that growing up in a place like this made it more difficult or made it?
I definitely don't think it made it more difficult for me. Like hearing my dad's stories when he grew up there, my grandma's. Like I think it was way more difficult for them. But for
Mhm.
me, my school was 50% Latina,
Okay.
50% white.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like hard for me to
Yeah.
navigate that because
Gotcha.
everyone held an identity that I held.
Yeah.
So that wasn't hard. But just hearing my parents' stories and being like, wow, like
Yeah.
how like in the same place just how much time can change
Wow. Yeah.
something to
Definitely.
be so different.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I wonder that all the time too. Like, ooh, what my mom's or my dad's experiences must have been like versus my own, and sort of, I mean, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Like, there's the like the biblical end is here and it's end times, but at the same time, I wonder if we get to enjoy maybe a little bit more. I don't know. It might not be. It's easier. It's easier and harder in different ways for us. But
Yeah.
versus what they had to go through it, in times like, where, I don't know. I guess you could say a lot has changed. I guess you could say a lot has stayed the same. So, but I often wonder that in terms of like measuring my own experiences against the people who came before me in my family. Like, what must have that been like? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess we should wonder. Should we talk about how we contribute to America?
Sure. Yeah.
I don't even. full disclosure, I'm a completely kind of like a Marxist, anarchist, socialist, and like I don't really even believe in America. So no, but I would love to talk about how maybe I contribute to it or my vision of it.
Yeah.
Um, I think that my parents, my grandparents especially, they felt very sort of sucked into the American dream, right? And part of that was feeling like they had to sort of climb the ranks and do all the right things and put in the work, and then if you do and if you never lose sight of that dream, you can get there. And so I've often felt my family weirdly like very strong American sentiments,
Mm-hmm.
like feeling like they're so lucky they found this place that nowhere else in the world could they have had the same opportunities that they had here versus anywhere else. And at first I was like, hell yeah, like go America. Like this is literally like come here with a dream and the will to make it happen, and it can. But I feel now that my family sort of fell into the same, maybe the same spell that a lot of people do, and that's not their fault because neoliberalism is one hell of a drug. Like it's really hard to not be swept up by these ideas. So I almost want the question to be not how I contribute to America, but how do we dismantle America? How do we? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I grew up as a military brat, so my dad was in
Oh
the Air
wow,
Force, and a lot of my
wow,
family is in the Air Force, and like my grandma, I think she did like live the American dream to her standards because she was widowed at 30 and she started out as a janitor at the hospital in Longmont and worked her way up to be head of sanitation. She has a very nice
wow,
house. We all like
wow.
always go over to visit her, and so I
And
think to that
does
stance,
she feel that sentiment too? Like, of
yeah,
course. I mean, her all of her work and drive and like where it's gotten
yeah.
her. Yeah.
So she really worked her way up. My dad worked his way up out of a not good situation through the military,
Hmm.
and being someone who got kicked out of the same college twice and just not doing well in school to being able to put his skills and talents towards something else, and then finally like being able to provide for like me and my sister. I know that's the thing he's proudest of, is that me
Hmm.
and my sister don't really have to worry about, he's paying for our college and he's helped my sister get her first place, and like
Yeah.
so I know he's living his American dream too, like being able to contribute that and being able for us to see all the hard work that his mom put in and that he
Yeah.
put in, and then him instilling that
Yeah.
vision in us and making sure that we're working hard too to like
Right.
continue to further what the American dream will be able
Yeah.
to look like for our children and stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. There's a sense of pride in that, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think my parents feel the same way too. I worry sometimes that I'll disappoint them with my very radical Marxist ideals that that want to break capitalism and want to like really like burn the place down. But
Yeah.
no, I think they're still proud of me. But I think that sometimes I think that they're want to be the same and they're want to fit in and assimilate sort of. It fell victim to this like idea that America that like is that's like this is the only place where anything can happen, and we just forget about the rest of the world, including at times the place where they came from. So
Yeah.
it's as someone who maybe had the privilege of going to college and taking a couple sociology classes, I'm like, no, this is not right. Like we need to problematize this. It's not good. But then I wonder, of course I would think that. I have an American passport. I have the privilege of being here. Of course I like kind of what you were saying with your position of confronting friends who say some
Yeah.
fucked up shit about race sometimes, or like, we're able to sort of, because we inhabit this place of like comfort, like I'm an American citizen, like I talk shit about this place all the time, kind of
Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
And I think too it's important that you do see problems with America, because I always feel like when people are like, oh, this is a problem, that a lot of people also think, because I complain about like some policies and stuff to my
Mm-hmm.
grandparents, and then they're like, "Oh, do you hate America?" And I'm like, "No, I love America, but just because you love something doesn't mean you can't identify problems with
For
it
sure,
and
right.
want it to like grow and change for the better."
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Um, I've always thought that my parents thought the way they had to contribute into this place is in the same way that you were describing, like work really hard, save up, and be really great so your kids can be great, and so that they can have a good start, and that their kids can have a good start, and that kind of thing. But how I personally contribute to America, I think, is going to be through exactly what we're describing of like problematizing things and having conversations like this. Especially, I think what Rosanna set out to do, especially, is an intervention on how we start to really like wake up from a lot of these like illusions that we've been living under, and sort of feeling like, yeah, I think connection has always been really important to me, and I think finding connection has been really important. Um, and if it's anything that I like about America, is that I feel like the opportunity to connect with people who have much different backgrounds than you do, come from different places, but you still can find a similarity. I feel like it's really, I'm lucky to live in a place where I get to do that, because it doesn't happen everywhere, and I think we really need to make use of that opportunity here. I really do. That's one thing my grandparents would talk about all the time, is that they were amazed to go to a grocery store. Okay, like, and in a grocery store in Baltimore City, like, no one looked the same. Like, you would see people from all over. I mean, like, there's tons of different communities in Baltimore that come from all over the world, and my I would always just remember my grandparents talk about the novelty of that. It's just not, you're going to the grocery store, you're going to the post office, and you're in a room, and you're seeing, and no one around you looks the same. And they said in Turkey, of course it wasn't like that. It's like we have this opportunity to really come into contact and really feel and know people who aren't like us, or and but they are like us. And
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. And yeah, I think no other place could you really, I mean, you could, let me not get too sappy and sentimental about America and the melting pot, but it is kind of cool. I don't know. I think it's cool. Do you still have any family in other countries?
No. I
They're all,
think
yeah,
we're all here for the all my knowing. Like, I'm
yeah,
sure I have a distant cousin
yeah,
still
somewhere,
living in Mexico or Ireland, but
yeah.
for the most part,
Have you
everyone's
ever been
here.
to Mexico?
To Cancun for that actual like.
Do you ever want to go back and see like parts of where your family came
Yeah,
from?
I think that would be like super cool to see, and I think from just knowing like a lot of my family history that like a lot of people in our family were from Colorado and then got pushed out
Yeah.
later on during like the US buying this land and stuff.
Oh wow.
So I think going back to where they might have settled down in Mexico would be super amazing to do, because the summer I got to go to Ireland and like see
Yeah.
where my grandparent, like
Oh,
my
that's
great
so cool.
grandpa, and like all of them started out and then like slowly immigrated to America.
Yeah.
So I think it would definitely be cool to be able to take a trip to
What was it
Mexico.
like to go back and see parts of Ireland?
I think it was very cool. I was there taking a Irish history class, so being able, and it was about the potato family famine, which drew my family out of
Yeah.
Ireland. So being able to like track those steps within like learning about it
Yeah.
at the same time was super cool and super great to just call my grandpa up and like talk to him about this and be like ask him about our family history and see how it played into like this bigger picture
Yeah,
of
that's
everything.
so interesting. That's super interesting. I never want to think that, like, I don't know. Is it too much of a hippy dippy thing to say that, like, if you go back to a place, like, you feel a connection to it? But, like, I definitely, the first time I saw my dad's village in Turkey, I felt like this eerie sense of connection. And I don't know, it could have just been like the jet lag or something, but I really did feel like,
But I think it is too the connection
yeah,
with your father and him probably talking about
yeah,
that and being like, I've
absolutely.
heard about this so much, and now I'm finally being able to like
Right.
see it, and there's something like so cool about that and so like great to get back to.
Right. Yeah, definitely. There's definitely an experience of, I don't know this place. I've never been here before, but I feel I'm having an emotional reaction to being here, and it's more than just like it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. It's connected to all these other things and these
Yeah.
memories that, yeah, we talk about that a lot in our my grad school and my classes is memory and remembering and disembodiment and oh god, really abstract, but it's something that's it resonates. I feel that. I feel like location is really important and feeling ties to a location is really important,
Yeah.
but it's also really fascinating when you feel ties to a place where you've never been before. You have had no time to sort of create any sort of memory to, but
Mhm.
yet when you go back there, you feel something nonetheless. So that's always been really interesting.